This is how to turn any crochet square into a pot holder. I just finished the lemon peel stitch tutorial, so if you want to make one like mine, you can go ahead and check out those videos first. This is a continuation of it, but you can use this method for any crochet square, which is why this is more a how to turn your square into a pot holder tutorial than a stitch tutorial. This pot holder does have reinforced edge and a reinforced loop, which means there's an extra layer of protection of your surfaces, and you can hang it on a hook or a nail without worrying about it falling apart on you. Now, the first step in creating a pot holder is to add a single crochet border. Now, whatever side is facing up when you're adding your border, that is going to be the right side. That's just a rule of thumb. You don't want the back side of a single crochet to be what people are looking at whenever they're looking at the front side of your project. So the border determines which side is the right side. For this square, I have 24 stitches going across and I have 20 rows going up and down. So normally I would just say add your single crochet border and I'll see you in the next part. But because I've gotten requests to show where to put your hook on the side when you don't have that same number of rows going across. The only time you're going to have the same number of rows is when you're working with single crochet, because single crochet make a perfect square. But for this stitch, we alternated single and double crochet, and along the side, we alternated half double and single crochet. So I'm going to show you how to work that into your project so that you can still have a pretty square. Another key about creating a square is to add 3 stitches in every corner. If you want a more rounded corner, then you just add 2 stitches. I personally prefer 3 because it's a little bit more crisp. And then the other option you have is whether or not you want to include those in your stitch counts. I generally do, because if I did want to have a rounded corner, I would add those in my stitch counts as well, which means the first stitch of a corner stitch is the last stitch of the row you finished, and the last stitch of a corner stitch is the first stitch of the side you're going to start. Now, when I'm working along the side that is the side of the row, the way that I like to do it is figure out how many stitches I need. So normally what I'll do is, and I kind of hate that I deleted those, but normally what I do when I'm working with a certain stitch for the first time is I'll just add 1 stitch in every single row and count how many stitches I end up with, because even though I have 20 rows, I might end up with 21 or 22, and it gives me more of a visual of how tight it actually looks and where it's tight. Because if you add all of your stitches on the edges, it's gonna distort your square to where it looks a little rounded, and then the center of your row is gonna be tight. So a way to mitigate that is to just have one side where you just put 1 stitch in every single row and see what it looks like. In this case, I ended up with 21 stitches, which means I need to add 3. I decided to add 3 by putting an extra stitch at the beginning of the side, an extra stitch at the end of the side, and an extra stitch in the middle of the side. So since I need a total of 24, I determined that the middle was going to be about the 12th stitch, which means I can add an extra stitch before or an extra stitch after. And then on the side pieces, I just picked the pieces that were closest to the corner. I hope that makes sense. I hope that the visual helps too, because I did add a stitch into every single crochet, and then for 3 stitches, I added 2 stitches into the double crochet or half double crochet, and then for the other ones, I just put 1 stitch in each. Then I'm adding 3 stitches to the corner, which means the 24th stitch is the first stitch of that corner, and then the 3rd stitch is the first stitch of the last side. Now, when you look at the last side, if you didn't watch my other videos, I did opt to work into the back bump of the beginning chain, which means that there is a pretty little edge along the bottom that looks just like a stitch top. I like to use this method whenever I'm adding a single crochet border because it mitigates that gap that you get along the beginning chain. So sometimes when you're working with single crochet borders at the bottom of your square or swatch or whichever, it'll have this big gap. If you work into the back bump of your beginning chain, there will be no gap. Or if you work into the front and the bottom loop of your beginning chain and then add the border into the back bump, there will also be no big gap. It's a super easy fix. However, it's only an easy fix if you can keep your beginning chain loose. If it's too tight, it's going to feel nearly impossible to work into. So I would recommend that if you have generally tight beginning chains, that you go up a hook size, and it'll really help down the road. It'll also help you understand just how much bigger the beginning chain has to be. So as you keep doing it, you'll realize I don't really need to go up a hook size anymore. I'm just gonna go back to my regular hook size, but now I know how big they need to be. So it doesn't have to be a permanent kind of thing. The other thing about working along the bottom is you can work in the slip knot tail without having to weave it in later. And we all hate weaving in our ends. So the more we can find solutions for problems, the more fun crochet will be. Because we started with 25 chains, ended up with 24 stitches, which means that our corner piece is going to be in the turning chain. Sometimes you have to skip a stitch in order to make your stitch counts add up. If you want to skip the first or the last stitch after a corner. It's going to be the most easily hidden. Same with adding stitches. If you need to add a stitch, always start at the corners, but don't add more than 2 in a row. Meaning before you add a third stitch, go for the center and then go for the distance between the center and the sides. If you start doubling up your stitches, it's going to create wonky edges. Then for the last side, we're going to do the same thing again, but the key here is we're not going up to 24. For this last side, we're only going to go up to 23, and that is to account for the space of the loop because we're not adding a 4th corner. If you wanted to add a 4th corner and skip the loop completely, put the 24th stitch in the same spot as the very, very first stitch, and then add a second one for the 4th corner piece. It's super simple. I know in the beginning nothing feels simple, but once it starts making sense, it just clicks. It really does. And then when it clicks, that's when you start designing your own stuff. And then the world will be even better off because the more designers we have, the better. That is my opinion. If you enjoy these kind of close-up stitch tutorials, please be sure to like and follow and consider sharing my videos with other people that you know, because I would love to have more people like you watching my videos. I find that lately the comments have been super kind. I hate this. I don't have as much time or the brain capacity to respond to all the comments anymore, which is such a bittersweet feeling because responding to comments brings me so much joy, but sometimes I can get overwhelmed now. I still read them all the time. Every single time a comment pops up, I read it, and then I try to remember to like it. Sometimes I'm on the go or in the carpool line waiting for my kids. It's just, thank you. I had a couple minutes in this video and I just wanted to say thank you because this has been such a dream come true. To just be able to make crochet videos, do something I feel so passionate about, and it be so well received is a dream. Once you get to the end, to make the loop, we're just going to chain 12. So the 23rd stitch is going to be right there next to the first stitch, but not in the same spot. And we're going to add 12 chains for the loop, and then we're going to slip stitch into the very first stitch. Now, when you're making your chains, you want to keep them the same size as your stitches, and that's gonna just make a difference aesthetically. Once you finish your project, you're going to be able to tell if your chains were too small or too big, because in the next step, we're going to add a slip stitch border. And this video is long enough, so I'm not going to show it in this video, but I hope to see you in the next part, and I hope you stay safe, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you later. Bye. This is how to add a slip stitch border to your single crochet border, and in this case make a pot holder. The key about the slip stitch is that you want the working loop on your hook be the same size as the stitch that you're working into. Now if you're somebody who likes to hold back the yarn on the hook to work into a stitch, don't do that. Just for the slip stitch, don't do that. Just let it be. Let it grow. Not go. Let it grow, because it is going to feel like it's way too big, but it's really not. What's most likely going to happen is that one of your slip stitches is going to be tight, but because another one is just slightly bigger, it's going to account for it. But if all of your slip stitches are too tight, it's going to look cinched in. Now, another thing is on the corners, you don't need to add extra slip stitches. You can just add one slip stitch into every single corner stitch. Then when you get all the way around and we get to the loop where we have our 12 chains, you want to work into both loops of the chain. So for the beginning chain, we worked into the back bump, but in this case, we're going to work into the bottom loop and the top loop. We're going to pick up one at a time. This is going to feel like it's taking forever, and if your chains are too tight, it's going to feel impossible, but it is going to add that reinforcement to the chain that is going to make your pot holder last forever. Because if you just have a regular chain and it's meant to be used, it's going to see wear and tear, and that wear and tear is going to be super visible. But by adding this reinforcement through the slip stitch, it's gonna minimize the wear and tear and make your pot holder last so much longer. Oh, and another thing about pot holders, always make sure you use cotton yarn. If it's going to be used, use cotton yarn. If it's just to look pretty, it doesn't matter, but if it's meant to be used, use cotton. It doesn't melt. It will burn if exposed to a direct flame, but it absorbs heat and it absorbs moisture, and it's washable and dryable. Now that we're at the end of our slip stitch border, we're going to add an invisible finish, and the invisible finish is going to make people wonder where it starts and where it ends, because no one's going to be able to tell. So first we're just going to cut our yarn without making a chain, and then we're going to skip the first stitch and we're going to work into the second stitch from the bottom up. We're going to bring the yarn up, and then we're going to bring it back down in front of the stitch, and we're going to feed it back through the center of our last stitch. So we're going to point it right here at the center of the stitch, and we're going to pick up the top loop, pull it out, and then we're just going to tug on it until it is the same size as the other stitch tops, and it's seamless. It's beautiful. It's invisible. Sorry. So next we're just going to weave in our ends in the back. So I like to do it where the yarn hides within the stitches, and then you definitely won't be able to tell where it is. The most important thing though, whenever you're weaving in your ends, is that you go around the corner 3 times. Yarn's not going to be able to travel around the corner more than once, so even after it's been in the wash. So this technically would be going around the corner once, and then it'll go around the corner twice, and we're good. then we're just gonna cut it and leave it at that. Another benefit of using a single crochet and slip stitch border is that you don't have to block it. You can just tug it on the sides and kind of stretch out the borders, and it's going to be a perfect little square. You don't have to block or do anything, which is also perfect for when it gets washed because washing undoes blocking. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to like and follow and consider sharing it with your friends, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!